Welcome to the Raw Food Health Empowerment Podcast. I'm your host, Samantha Salmon, certified integrative nutrition coach and brain health license trainer. I almost said therapist, but no. Brain health license trainer. And I'm so excited to be talking with you today about a very important topic, Digestion 101, how raw foods impacts the gut. We're going to be talking about gut-brain connection, neurotransmitters. And first, I want to point you to a resource at rawfoodmealplanner.com. It's a checklist, how to diversify your gut microbiome. I think you will be very much interested in this if you're interested in this topic around digestive health. So let's get into it, okay? Now, how raw foods impact the gut, right? And this goes hand in hand with diversifying your gut microbiome. Why is that even important, right? If you're new to this whole concept or topic, let me start from the very beginning. The gut microbiome, so basically there are 5 different, let's say, species living in your gut, right? It's not just us, right? We actually more microbes than DNA, so we're more microbes, bacteria than even human, right? So we have what do we have in there? We have bacteria, we have virus, we have fungi, we have archaea, which has been around from the beginning of time, which is, you know, when you hear like the woo people talk about we're ancient, we literally are ancient, right? It's right there in our gut, archaea. And there's one I always forget. Okay, the one I always forget is yeast, which is like, ooh. So all of these things are these microorganisms. They're all living inside our gut, right? And specifically, so all of this is considered the microbiome. All of those species, those microorganisms that are living inside your gut, that's called the microbiome. But there's bacteria that lines your entire digestive system from your mouth all the way to down the other end, right? For women, the vagina, which is actually, you know, that whole cavity inside, not the outside, that, you know, has bacteria, which actually when women have vaginal births and the babies come out, the bacteria there is what's making up the immune system of the baby, right? That's basically the start of our immune system. So this is what we're working with. Now, what's down there to digest the food that we're consuming, because that's basically the role that they play. We're eating food, the bacteria is eating some of this food. Some of the foods, some bacteria thrive, and some foods it doesn't thrive, right? It's like if we're not eating certain foods, the bacteria that feeds off that type of food dies off, basically. So this is where digestion really comes into play. So for example, if you went from eating a lot of ultra processed food to now you're eating a whole food vegan lifestyle, and you find yourself having a lot of gas and digestive upset, nausea, diarrhea, that type of thing, it's most likely because the bacteria that thrives off of processed food that was in your system does not do well with this healthy food, and you don't really have the bacteria yet to digest this healthy food, this healthy fiber that's coming in, right? Because that's what they're consuming, basically, is that fiber. And so if you don't have it, the way to mitigate those symptoms and to kind of get over that hump of, you know, all that digestive upset, the bloating, gas, diarrhea, all of that, is to go low and slow, as Dr. Wilby says everywhere in his programs, in his books and everything. He's a gastroenterologist. And basically, you know, we've kind of known this concept from FODMAP. I wrote a blog post about it and talked about it some years past about low FODMAP. FODMAP is a variety of classes of different types of sugars. And typically in the past, you know, when folks have digestive upset, the low FODMAP protocol is basically doing an elimination diet where these FODMAP foods you would eliminate for a while, give the gut lining time to heal, and then you reintroduce the foods. Now, what Dr. B is saying is that, for a lot of the foods that folks are having issues with, it doesn't make sense to eliminate them because they're healthy foods. So instead, in order to develop the bacteria needed to digest it properly without any digestive upset, we need to go low and slow, which we're talking about dosing, right? And so I have a blog I'll link below. This book is a book for teens, which is, I love it because it's very accessible, very understandable. It talks about low FODMAP. And this was the first time that I had learned, I feel like, because we talked about the elimination diet in my coach training program, but this book talked about, if you're dealing with digestive issues and you want to follow low FODMAP protocol, quantity is really a factor here, right? So I went from having 6 bananas for breakfast to experimenting with 1 and found out that the bananas was triggering digestive upset in me, where it wasn't before, right? In my early 20s it was fine, and then it came a time where I was starting to have issues, and I don't even remember why, like what those issues were. I'm pretty sure I probably shared it on the blog, but this is around the time that I found this book or looked for this book and started experimenting with those lower quantities. Same thing with the cauliflower. I don't know if you've ever had experience with cauliflower and getting gassiness from it and lots of bloat. I've had that experience in the past. And they have, in the book, they have a breakdown of the quantities, right? You don't have to eliminate it completely, but if you go down to this small quantity. And so the mindset too at that time was like, okay, you can go down to this small quantity or you could do the elimination diet. Now for me personally, I like in the case of bananas, I wasn't really about to give up bananas. Even though I did experiment with that for a while, it took me a long time to get there because that's not first choice, right? I love bananas, and bananas make an awesome smoothie. They're affordable, they're accessible. Mangoes are great, but bananas have a different flavor, and they're just more affordable and accessible, basically, than mangoes. And but I experimented with the 1 banana, and now I could do 1 banana. So you never know what you could do until you experiment and give things a try. There's this one health coach I found. I can't remember her name, but if I could find her podcast, I'll share it with her. I don't know her personally, but I really like her work. I don't even know how I found her, but somehow I landed on her work, and she's doing like Daniel Plan coaching, which we've talked about before, which is more of a, it's plant-based, but it's not necessarily, I don't think it's vegan. I'm not sure. I don't think it's vegan because the people that started it and promoted it, they're not vegan, but it is plant-based. There's a heavy emphasis on plants, and it's focused on basically bringing the plant food knowledge into churches and helping churches get on board with healthy eating, right? But she said on a podcast something that I thought was really profound, which was saying you like something or don't like something, right? It's almost like, I have to re-say it in my words because I can't remember exactly how she said it, but basically you don't like it today, but that doesn't mean you won't like it tomorrow, right? Because your palate changes and you're going to get used to it. And so to get over that, the way you get from not liking it to liking it is by eating it. Eating it and not focusing so much on like. And so, and this I think is really helpful for like, because she even talked about, I don't know if it was the same podcast or a different one, about exercise. Like, she's a big exercise advocate. She may even be a trainer, I can't remember. And somebody said, everything's easy for you because you like to exercise. And she's like, no, I don't like to exercise. I don't want to exercise, but she does it because she knows how how it feels on the other side. And I can totally relate to that, because me personally, my body doesn't want to move if it doesn't have to, it wants to stay and preserve energy as much as possible. But I know that it needs to move, because if it doesn't move, I'm experiencing XYZ, all of these, not comfortable things in my body and even mentally, that because I know these things, I don't get into this whole debate with myself whether or not I'm going to exercise. It's a non-negotiable. Just like I don't debate myself on taking a shower, on brushing my teeth, on putting on deodorant, right? These are just natural things that, I do. It's not, do I feel like doing it today? No, a decision was made a long time ago that this is part of my routine. This is who I am, right? And it's the same thing with exercise, like getting that into your head, like, okay, this is when I exercise on the calendar. This is what I'm going to do. This is the plan. And like, you make that decision and you just stick with it, right? And so the first part is just making the decision. The second part is coming up with a plan. Third part is follow through. Follow through is so important. And it's big for me because I am huge on follow through. Anytime I say to you or anyone else that I'm gonna do something, best believe I'm gonna do it, right? Because I follow through no matter what. No matter what. If I say I'm gonna do something, my word is my bond. And it's not just, I don't put on for other people. I put on for myself, right? So the first person I'm responsible for and to is me, right? So if I say to myself, I'm gonna do something, I hold me accountable to that promise. Me. I'm not concerned about what other people have to say or what they think or whatever. It's me. I have to look myself in the mirror and say, did I do it? Did I not do it? And follow through, right? You know the character of a person by their follow through. That shows their reliability and their seriousness, right? Where their priorities are, right? Because I think everyone's following through on something, right? But not everything that they say. Some people just talk and talk, but they're not really about that life, right? And so, anyway, that's the follow through is really where everything's at. And it's the same thing when it comes to getting your digestive health in order, getting on a high raw diet or a raw food diet or whatever your health goal is, right? So we already basically established the fact that how raw foods impact the gut. All foods actually impact the gut. Bad foods, good foods, processed foods, whole foods, they're all impacting the gut. The processed foods are making bad bacteria in the gut thrive and flourish, and whole healthy foods are making the good bacteria that thrives on those foods flourish, right? So you want to do more of those healthier foods, the fiber-rich foods, and diversify that. Now, Dr. Will B, I believe his recommendation is to have like 30 different plants a day, which seems like a lot and seems tricky. But if you have this concept of low and slow and just a little bit, right? Especially for foods that are very triggering to you. So like, let's say beans, like for me, for example, I can't do a lot of beans and I can't do a lot of beans without greens, right? I could do a good amount of beans, but I cannot digest them without greens. Now, if I don't have greens, it's going to be like this much beans, and then I'll be fine, right? Because it's the same kind of thing. So you kind of have to experiment with your body, and that's something that I have been doing as a coach. That's really where a coach comes in to kind of help with that, not just the accountability, but also being a detective for your own body, because everyone's gut microbiome is as unique as our fingerprint, right? So if each one of us in the world has a very different fingerprint, the gut bacteria, the microbiome is going to be the same. Why? Because the microbiome is being impacted not just by what you eat, but also by what you put on your body, the environment around you, whatever toxic gases or anything that's around you, even your living environment, your nature, like all of that, right? So like, for example, I just came back from a 3-month trip to Poland. I was eating food that Poland has available, which is different food than what America has available. Some of the stuff that I was eating in Poland was coming even from Africa and other European countries, right? So things that normally in America I wouldn't even have here, right? That's number one. Number two, the air in Poland is very different than America, right? So that's impacting my gut. The air on the plane impacting my gut. Traveling different time zones. They have research studies published on NIH also impacts the gut microbiome, right? The sleep, the you know, the difference in time, and that impacts the gut. What else? The stress impacts your gut, right? So you have folks who are highly stressed versus folks who they have a meditative practice, maybe nothing really bothers them. They're very, you know, easygoing, right? The stressed out people, their guts are being impacted. You could have a really healthy, clean diet, right? And have lots of stress going on just from other things, right? That really messes up the gut. Now you're having all this digestive issues, GERD and all sorts of things, right? So these are kind of like how our gut basically gets impacted. Now, the gut-brain connection. This one is vital really for healing. But first, I want to share this quote from Becoming Raw. It's a really good book that I highly recommend. It's called Becoming Raw, The Essential Guide to Raw Vegan Diets by Brenda Davis and Vasanto Molina. And this part too, raw vegan diets, is important because even so within the plant kingdom, right, there are many ways to eat, right? There's vegan, there's keto vegan, there's raw foods, there's pegan, right, which was paleo vegan, which I don't hear too many people talking about anymore. But you know, there's also the Mediterranean diet, which is not vegan, but there's a vegan style of Mediterranean, right, which has, you know, that heavy emphasis on the fats from the oils and things like this. You know, Mediterranean, there's a heavy emphasis on fish. And, you know, there's ways to do that in a vegan way as well. If you want the fish flavor, if you're looking more for the omega-3 fatty acids, you know, there are different things you can emphasize. There's all these different diets is basically, what are we emphasizing more of? What are we doing less of? And, you know, why are we doing it? In the raw food world, there are different types of ways of eating as well. There is raw vegan keto, which is a high fat way to eat within raw veganism. How you do it? A lot of nuts and seeds. You could even do oils, right? More oils than some other folks are doing. Then there's the living foods, right? Which would also be, because these folks are not cooking, right? So this is all raw food, but the living foods diet has more of an emphasis on sprouting, not doing dehydrated stuff like breads and things like that, because yeah, you can make raw vegan breads, raw vegan pizzas and things like this, where you're spending a lot of time dehydrating. With living foods, the whole point is you want to get that water, that nourishment, all of the enzymes and things like this. And then there's the natural hygiene movement, which is different than the living, because they have emphasis on other things. But there's different ways to eat, you know, within this raw food lifestyle. There's also 80-10-10, which is where I'm more in alignment with, and also high raw. So I'm not 100% raw, I'm high raw, and I follow 80-10-10. And how did I come to this conclusion for myself? Is through experimentation, documentation, and really tuning into my body and seeing how I feel, right? Being a detective for myself to come to a way of eating that matches me, my lifestyle, my wants, needs, how I thrive, you know, all of this stuff. So Anyway, this quote from the book: researchers have observed that when a living food diet is adopted, it dramatically alters our gut microflora, increasing the friendly bacteria that live in our intestines. And this is important because we want that bacteria, the friendly ones, to thrive, right? Because that's what creates a whole healthy ecosystem in the entire body, where our hormones are balanced, our brain is working right. And why? Because there is that gut-brain connection, that gut-brain axis, where the bacteria in our gut is actually sending neurotransmitters. They're neurotransmitters being sent. Think of them like the postal service, right? Messages going out to the brain. And the bad bacteria in your stomach could send messages to the brain and say, get popcorn, get chips, get, right? Those cravings you think you have ain't even yours. They're coming from the bad bacteria, right? So once you eat the healthier foods, those good foods is sending better messages to your brain, like nice thoughts, right? Because I think one of the things that processed foods and foods that are void of fiber and have all these chemicals and things in them, they affect the gut microbiome. Those neurotransmitters are being sent, and our mind is saying some crazy stuff like you'll never be successful. You're better off not being alive. Nobody cares about you. Just nasty stuff you would never say to yourself, right? And don't think you're alone in this, because there's a lot of people dealing with stuff like this, and they're not speaking up, they're not saying anything, and they don't really have to, right? But what I want everyone to know is that you don't have to believe all the negative thoughts that come to your head. These thoughts are not real, first of all. Secondly, a good portion of the thoughts could be tracked to the foods that you're eating, to the products that are on your skin. Why? Because these products are being absorbed by the body through the skin, the air that you're breathing, right? If you are, in a really toxic environment and those toxins are coming in, they're affecting the brain, right? And then the brain, now you're having these horrible thoughts because the brain is not getting proper blood flow. Toxins affect blood flow to the brain, right? What else? If you're living in nature, in Poland, I spent a lot of time in parks, on the beach, walking, hiking, doing all sorts of stuff out in nature. All of those trees, all those birds, that I experienced in Poland, all of that affected my gut microbiome, affected my brain, right? So I had a lot of positive thoughts, a lot of peaceful and happy emotions in Poland because of that, right? That balanced out a lot of the changes too in my diet, where I went from my home environment where I was doing no oil to now being eaten out, and there's oil, right? And there's lots of salt. When I make food, I don't put that much salt in my food. So you're having hyper palatable foods out there, and it does affect the brain, but I had nature around to kind of help balance all that out. And I can't say that it was all part of a big plan or something to really cater to my microbiome, but luckily my interests are in alignment with a healthy gut. So yeah, many of these neurotransmitters are made in the gut. So if you want healthy, happy thoughts, I think it's foundational to eat clean. And clean to me is raw fruits and vegetables. And if you're gonna cook, make sure you're steaming, boiling, using water basically, because that helps to keep more of the nutrients in. The reason why we eat raw, right, is to keep as much nutrients, enzymes, and all of that intact. When you cook beyond 118 degrees, you lose some of those enzymes. From a digestive perspective, it's just easier to digest raw foods because they basically digest themselves. Whereas cooked foods is a little harder, especially if you've had a history or experience with acid reflux. this is really helpful. So hopefully this has been helpful. I highly recommend that you go to rawfoodmealplanner.com and download the checklist on how to diversify your gut microbiome. You can definitely do this on a raw food lifestyle, right? Get those plants in. Some of the easiest ways to do it is like through smoothies, through salads. You could throw a lot of stuff in there. And let's see, for the next episode, we're going to be talking about raw foods and regularity. We're talking about smooth bowel movements, because this is super important, making sure we have regular bowel movements, and not just regular, but making sure they look right, they smell right. That means that you have a healthy system, and that's really what this is all about, how to be our healthiest selves. So until next time, be well.